we're building an adopted district program that is staffed by a central team of volunteers, but is comprised of the local groups and individual activists. And our work will continue here, and everyone is invited to join that team, both to adopt your local district, but also to help recruit others, other groups and activists to join in as we fill in the adopted districts around the country. This is all to create a basic framework, a physical network, and to get many coalitions set up in these across sectors within these districts. The FAITH team is creating its own parallel system that will connect to the adopted district teams at the local level. And then the plan is to add scientists, legal, and health professionals to these many local coalitions so that they're ready to act in concert in the short term, but more importantly, when we have a comprehensive bill. We'll also continue the climate bill package now that has 10 bills, but with several more pending. As you all know, that's a lot of work to set that up, inviting the lead sponsors, et cetera. One of them is, I think, going to pass the Associated Industry Manufacturing Bill, AIM bill, which is the hydrofluorocarbons bill. So that feels like a little victory already, even though we didn't do a lot of heavy lifting. People on this call have been fighting on that front for a long time. And I think it never hurts to be pushing for other people to get moving on something. So that's good progress. But anyway, we have several other bills, and these all gave a starting point for the local joint lobbying, which has begun wonderfully. So the work we have to do here is to review additional bills and to see where additional consensus might be. We have to check in with all the lead sponsors, or not the Congress people, but the groups, and make sure the bills are being refiled, et cetera. We also have the policy sector teams reviewing the details of proposed bills and congressional plans, and those will continue. So we'll have our own assessment of things and our own, intellectual capacity. And it would be great to have folks on those sector teams help with the outreach to the groups, to other groups and coalitions for the two new big efforts that we'll delve into more today, a coalition of coalitions and a comprehensive climate bill. So this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, and it transcends our internal organizing and network building. So it's like we're running a few things simultaneously. We're running climate crisis policy, which has its digest and some core work. And then now we have this adopted district network we're growing, which is its own, sort of thing in a way. And now we're going to try to host these couple committees to launch these two other big pieces. So a few thoughts on that real quickly. The first committee is on a coalition of coalitions. And we'll start that off with volunteers, and then we'll reach out to various groups to invite them to participate in the formation. It may be that some big partners want to pick this up and they can then convene and we can attend and give input as opposed to convening everything. But we won't wait for that at the earlier stages of things. We'll move forward to review the various structures that are available, co-op structures, there are lots of options, and we'll report back to that. There are many considerations and starting points. In our last core meeting, we talked about some of these in depth, but for today, I'll just mention transparency. We always have open meetings and for very strategic reasons. Inclusiveness, everyone's always welcome. Community, so we're here to support each other and build that political power together as an intentional underpinning. Autonomy, that everybody always retains their own voice. We're not looking to get into groupthink here. And then that everyone does their own ideas, and then we hopefully find collective ideas to do together. But we don't really put these strategies or actions or things at odds with one another, because it's time for both and in such an emergency. So we'll talk a lot about these things going forward. We'll look at other principles like the Jimenez principles. There are also issues to tackle here about what active participation entails, like designating specific staff to participate, linking up communications teams, creating a culture of conflict resolution and discussing up front these things, and then figuring out the process. And process is the most important word really, for communication, for consultation, and for decision making. The most important thing we need to do about this today is figure out when that committee will have regular meetings. And this is the part I'm most stressing about. When are we going to meet? Have all these meetings? And So that's top of agenda for when I finish with this seemingly endless opening. I'm sorry it's so long, but we're trying to, set the lay of the land for everyone this time. And, in past meetings, it hasn't been me doing all this. But we're in this transition, so I feel like it's necessary. The second piece is the Committee on a Comprehensive Climate Bill, and that is a bit more complicated even. So for this, we'll start again with volunteers, again to figure out who to invite to participate early on in the process, who to engage that would be able to carry such a project. And this involves also recreating the policy sector teams, essentially, but with major organizations representing those topics. So so that's to get them to participate in the process of drafting the legislation. So for example, we have an EJ and JT team and within CCP, right? And that's lovely, and we're doing all sorts of analysis. But the EJ team in the Comprehensive Climate Bill would hopefully be represented by the NAACP and We Act and Climate Justice Alliance, so that we get to that level of participation on preparing what kind of policy they'd like to see in legislation. That's a big dream and it's a big goal. So we'll see how that materializes. Now that we had such a successful symposium, it seems like we can do anything, but it's one thing to get people to attend a symposium, and this is a whole nother level. So it would be great to also get a working group of legislative directors from the various coalitions and groups that could then help collect the existing bills, collect all the existing policy proposals, of which there are several already from different coalitions, and review those. And this too has already started to happen, according to Felice at EDF, Environmental Defense Fund. The major enviros have already come together and started to review their individual platforms and to see where the overlap is. And then you set out on the task of figuring out what the agreements are and disagreements, and then charting a path to resolve those if you can, and if not, to have alternative proposals. And this process, any process around this, I hope would include interactive consultation with the public. And then the last key element of this would be a scientific advisory committee by MIT and Drawdown to help us figure out what policies are required to accomplish what level of greenhouse gas reductions and drawdown. Whereas before we were talking about that team reviewing outside proposals, so looking at existing legislation or whatever legislation this new committees might come up with, the more I've been thinking about it and hearing what they've been saying and their readiness and level of expertise, it may well make sense for them to set the parameters a little bit for us and at the outset, some of the policy goalposts. And then you could work backwards from that, and the legislative directors could work within that framework. And that would be an interesting way to step forward. So we'll see if they're up for that level of leadership and that role, or whether it'll be more collaborative, but any of it's fine. The big point is that we're gonna have the scientists involved in this, and they not only have science, they have sophisticated analysis of what they think it's gonna take. So it's gonna be a very interesting type of conversation. All right, almost done. So from there are many ways for us to focus the demands early on. So there could be a few preliminary group legislative demands that emerge from this, and maybe an outline sooner rather than later. That could be the basis for more immediate demands, like the bill package. So we'll see if that can materialize, but there are many ways to get specific policy demands in play that are a little bit more precise and packaged in a campaign than some of the broad brush policy proposals that are out there. So, but the real goal here is not immediate action, but setting goalposts for the big push that will actually alter the political power. So, because as it stands, we're begging. And we need to grow the infrastructure and consensus at all levels, and much broader than just the environmental groups, in order to have real political power. And that's the journey that we're undertaking. So I never planned on taking this on. When I looked at this movement in 2016, I went to NRDC. I went all the way to DC, and after an extensive process of networking to even make contact there, and I told them that the movement needed 3 things. And I have this, I was cleaning out my notes and I found this is my NRDC pitch that I walked into their offices with. June 2016. And it says on it, you need a guiding light, an earth bill that has a litmus test, a movement, inspiration, and united goal. And then I said, you need coalition infrastructure. And the last piece, you need a transparent movement to build interface with the public and plug in all the grassroots groups. So this is the same mission that we're on now. They wanted me to do it, and I laughed and I told them they needed to do this because according to their own websites, there wasn't time for me to do this as an individual. It was crazy. The earth was going over a cliff in 10 years, according to their own documents. It took me 6 years to get the gay rights movement to file the Equality Act. And they could flip a switch and make this happen in months. But that didn't happen. Although, you know, Food and Water Watch followed the All Fossil Fuels Act, and we got Sunrise involved, and things have catapulted forward since then on this topic. But here we are 3.5 years later, and we're doing it ourselves a little bit, but we're not alone. The symposium revealed that there's very high level interest in these two big issues. And that is very exciting news. So the task ahead of us on our inner core team is now to engage all the groups again to see how this can go forward, all the groups from the symposium. And I've heard individually from some, and there's just so much to do there, as you can imagine. It's a little bit overwhelming to think about how to even proceed to next steps. So my hope is, though, that they will pick up and lead many parts of this, and then we'll be able to provide a grassroots platform to make sure that the process is inclusive and transparent. But given that we can't wait, we will proceed as best we can to move forward on all of this. It'll take a lot of us to do this. These are huge lifts, they're big goals, lots of emails and lots of meetings. But I do think we can launch it. We have a lot of momentum and broad base of support. And I saw the engine come into motion for the symposium. And if that's just an inkling of what we're going to be able to do, I am more optimistic that we as the grassroots can help to wag the tail that wags the dog. And I really hope, most importantly, that our passion for the planet, that everyone here feels so intensely, will help us find a path to unity. So that's a long intro, but I'm trying to set the stage. The timing as this plays out will depend on a few things out of our control, but we can set Earth Day week, the weeks preceding Earth Day, as a general goal for deliverables to be determined. And Climate Reality Project and Al Gore already announced the idea of a climate Congress, which was an idea put forth by Center for Biological Diversity at the symposium. And I'm working to schedule a meeting with Ken Berlin already to talk about next steps. Maybe they'll want to carry that effort, and we can just help with programming and vision, et cetera. So that's it. The only main thing I want to do today is to schedule the committee meetings, find times for those two big committees when we want to meet. And I really didn't have an agenda for the rest of the meeting. I'm going to put the sign up form back in the chat. We've already had about 50 or so people sign up. Let's see, where's the chat function? More chat. And so that's exciting. Please sign up there if you'd like. And so again, that's a lot. I know that was a lot. Oh my gosh, we're already up to 70 people.
Todd, Attell has something she would like to say.
Oh, Attell's here. Wonderful, Attell, welcome. Attell's been one of those forces. There are a few of you who keep pushing me forward, even when I'm saying, okay, that was nice, let's take a break. And after the symposium, it was not the intention of the symposium that we were going to continue with these ideas. But afterwards, a few people called me and I was pretty much exhausted, and they kept saying, no, we have to do it. We have to do it. And Attell is one of those. So Attell, please welcome. And if you don't mind giving a little brief introduction of, because other folks haven't known you so much and then what your thoughts are, please.
Thank you so much, Todd. And I'm sorry I've been AWOL for the last month. 3 people in my nuclear family have COVID, and one of them's on a respirator in a hospital. So it's been kind of a personal nightmare, and I keep dropping out of all these things that I want to do. But I'm passionately committed to what Todd and everybody here has been contributing to. And just a little bit about myself. I used to be research director for Greenpeace in Southeast Asia. I most recently have been Senior Campaigns Director at Mighty Earth, which focuses a lot on deforestation. And before Greenpeace, I used to work at Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, and have been knighted for my environmental work in France, which is where I'm originally from. But the thing that I wanted to flag up for you all was that I tried after the symposium to do a couple things that I thought would be really helpful for everyone. And the most important was to bring up the idea of the climate bill to Netroots Nation. Probably a lot of you know about this. Netroots Nation organizes the biggest gathering of progressives every year in the United States, like more than 3,000. And what's nice is it's exactly what Todd was saying. It's not really just environmentalists. It's people who are involved in Black Lives Matter and racial justice and women's rights and the right to choose and like a host of progressive issues. And so I thought it would be a really great way to broaden out the tent. And the Netroots Nation people said that every year they do a pre-conference right before their big conference, and that they would do a pre-conference about a climate bill. And so I think part of what's really a great way to move forward is to not, feel like we have to control or dominate the process, but just to sort of keep spreading the tent and include others and let them kind of feel ownership and passion themselves and put it into their own agenda. So I thought getting this into the agenda of Netroots Nation was maybe one of the most important things we could do for the year. And the other is I've also reached out to Sunrise and Fridays for Future and a couple other of the youth leadership movements in the US, and voters, especially they're people who work on racial justice and environmental issues, and they're all keen to support in different ways. So I just want
This is so exciting. And your perspective in it all is just so, let's see, how do I say? It's just, you've been living this world for so long. So the fact that you think that this is the right path and that we should proceed and that you're putting so much effort into all your outreach already, it just is a huge validation. And, with all these things, it's hard, these are big lifts. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You haven't been MIA at all, not according to my email inbox. You weren't MIA at all. And it was so exciting because Attell started inviting all sorts of people to the symposium. And just when you're struggling, when you're doing something big like this, you need these signs of support. And when you see other people jumping in and pulling and putting their credibility and reputations, in the mix, you're like, okay, we're doing the right thing. We'll keep going. We'll keep going. All right. Well, that's wonderful. Is there anything else you wanted to share, Attell, or? I know.
The chairman of Mighty Earth is Henry Waxman, who brought us like the closest we've ever gotten to a climate bill in the past with the Waxman-Markey bill, that died in the Senate, obviously, but it came really close. So with some of the others at Mighty Earth, we were just sort of wondering when would be the right moment to activate Henry and to help sort of bring some of his leadership to bear to push for a climate bill that basically is like, reimagining the Waxman-Markey bill and updating it to reflect all the changes that have happened in America since that was tried and got so close.
All right, wonderful. They're great examples now. The Off Fossil Fuels Act, that bill, the 100 by 30. There's so many bills now to work from. We shouldn't have this conversation probably in an open general meeting, but these are the next conversations I've been eager to have. Is like, what do you think about the idea of trying to get legislative directors from a variety of groups and the tables together and to start talking about this?
I reached out to a lot of the legislative directors of the groups that came to the symposium. So hopefully next time around, we'll have more of or sometimes they're not the legislative directors, but they're like the policy directors or the people who are in charge of relationships on the Hill. So I think next time around, we'll just keep honing in.
All right, wonderful. So you're already on that. I'm glad. So we'll talk again off this event, but about what role you could play in helping to lead the legislative committee, or we'll see whatever role you want to play, of course. But we just need to get a little bit of a structure in place. So like we'll have our level, but then there's going to be newer levels joining these conversations. And so I'm like myself a little bit panicked about trying to navigate all of these, just from an organizational standpoint. So I'm trying to figure out how we are to engage that level of the community and, to bring that into formation. And it could be that it's much easier than I'm thinking about trying to do it myself. I mean, I should probably send out an email to the symposium folks soon. I invited them all to this just to let them know what was happening. But we can figure out, I mean, we have this January 13th date on the calendar too, which is just another one of our general meetings. And we had talked about maybe trying to invite some of the parties forward to share their ideas for that meeting. And I don't know if that's too soon. But now I'm up against this every 2-week meeting deadline. And so I have to program these meetings. And, now that it's like always the next is ahead of me, and I can't almost catch my breath on this. So I need to get a couple lined up, I think, and that will help. And I'm just not sure if it's too soon, to try to bring anyone else forward from that world to speak to the community at large. And how soon we want to invite Gina McCarthy, for example, to come maybe in February, give her some time to get on the ground. And I love it. Tell head shaking. It's gonna like him. And so those kinds of things. But so on this, we're going to have an inner core team is what we're calling it now. So we have the core team meetings that are, first and third Mondays of the month, and everyone's welcome to those. And it's supposed to be more of it's all of our teams that are working on things coming together and us having a group staff meeting essentially to check in on all of those things. And you get to sit there and listen to the different, as we go through the topics. But from that, we're going to need to have an inner core team is what I've come up with as a temporary name. And that's folks who have really been working in depth on things so far, particularly on the symposium, but who are involved in the various other LinkedIn. So just think about that, particularly if you've been involved for a while, if you want to be on that. We have a good core team, inner core team to start with, and we have to figure out the scheduling of meetings for that as well. So I'm not sure how we're going to do meeting scheduling in a meeting this large today, if at all possible. But if we were going to have a legislative committee meeting, generally, and it'd be a working group figuring out next steps on all of these pieces. So you might be working at your level, and then we'd have other people working at different levels. But if we were to have such a thing, is that something you would be interested in? Not to put you on the spot on this call, but if so,
Sure.
Is there a time that would work for you?
I could certainly do that and serve at least as an interim measure. Eventually, I think we should get someone better than me. There's a couple of folks for the legislative leadership. I mean, I'm happy to do it as a starter. But Dan Estey, who is the professor of environmental law at Yale Law School, he also teaches at the business school, and he was the Secretary of Environment for Connecticut. His wife was a congresswoman. Before that, he was I think number 3 at the EPA, or Michael Gerard at Columbia Law School, who's really big on this climate litigation stuff. I think, I'm happy to do it as an interim measure, but I think we should find a superstar to run it. And then I would gracefully bow out and become their assistant.
Right. So
but I'm happy to do it to get it all started and get it all off the ground until we find someone amazing to run it. Or we could be very strategic and politically savvy and try to trap Greenpeace or something, a really big organization, like get the law and policy director at NRDC or the leading lawyer at the Sierra Club. If I could, I'll just try to find a superstar to replace me, either to bring in institutional power or experience, personal expertise and acumen.
Wonderful, exactly. So that's what this really is, a working group to get this launched. So because somehow it has to start somehow, and that's always the hardest part of any of these things. So, and there's a few people that have already volunteered to help me on that. But is there a particular time, or should we try to schedule this later? Do you want to do this on a Saturday, or do you rather do it during the week?
I think weekends
to have an
better.
hour check-in meeting.
I think an hour long is good, 90 minutes maybe. And then it can be
Yeah, 90
shorter
could be
if we,
perfect.
let's do 90 minutes and it can be shorter if we are efficient. And I think weekends is best because so many people are extremely busy during the week.
So why don't we do Saturday at noon? Or do we want to do it earlier? Saturday noon.
It has to be good for
Um,
multiple time zones. So we'd have to make sure we can get East Coast, West
Yeah,
Coast.
so noon's the earliest we
Um,
can do it. Usually that's fine because
Probably,
9 o'clock, yeah.
probably it should be noon Pacific time or something like that.
Well, noon Eastern is 9 a.m. specific. Oh, so you're saying 3 in the afternoon Eastern time?
Something like that, yeah. So that, you know, people with kids and whatever, you know, mornings not always easy.
All right. You think afternoon's easier then? All right. So for now, we're going to set it at Saturdays at 3 p.m. weekly, 3 p.m. Eastern time.
And it can shift, you know, we can do doodles over time to see what time is best for the people that
Yeah,
need to
It's just the
change
first
it.
one. Now, if anyone is on that, has volunteered for the legislative committee team, if you know, just, I don't know what to say about that. We're going to try that for this time because there's too many people to try to crowdsource that on the call. The other committee we need to put up together is the Coalition of Coalitions. So I'm thinking, let's just do these both on the same day. Let's do the Coalition of Coalitions at 5 p.m. Oh, I hate to do that late in the day on Saturday.
That's okay. I think it's good because then you get people from East Coast, West Coast. It's
And
before
you don't
dinner.
think the East Coast people would rather get up at 9 and have the meeting and have it done with, so they have their whole day? That's the thing I'm thinking about. Earlier meetings might
Let's
clip
try
the
it.
day.
Let's try it just, you know, as a tentative thing, and then we can do doodles as time goes by. If people really object and it's very bad for them, we'll do doodles and we'll find something that works better.
Perfect.
And
All right,
also
so
we have to keep in mind that, you know, we may have to broaden out the composition of each of the coalitions. So for example, for the Environmental Justice Coalition, the one about how racial justice and environmental justice intersect, I can think of a couple people like Winona LaDuke, she's the Indigenous rights leader who's fighting line 3 from Enbridge for the pipeline, you know, people like that. So we would, I think, for each coalition, each committee, for each committee, we'd need to think about bringing in people like that. And that means also working around their schedules, so being a bit flexible, but we can just pin down a tentative time for
yeah,
now.
okay, absolutely, all of that, totally. Once it starts to go, then all those folks will schedule their own committee meetings, just like we sort of do with our policy sector teams now. You guys all meet on your own schedules. We just got to get the ball rolling. All right, so this is good. So we've decided now, Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern is the legislative committee, and at 5 p.m. is the coalition's meeting. 90 minutes each with a break in between. We'll see how long we can sustain that meeting schedule, but I think that sounds good just to get us off the ground. All right, that's, I love a meeting when we schedule the next meeting. That's like the most important thing to happen in a meeting. I saw that folks are saying earlier would be better. Catherine, yeah, any
I'm
other
sorry,
thoughts?
yeah. Do we know the date of the first Saturday to do this? In January, there's the 9th, maybe that would be the first possible.
I think it's the 9th.
Okay,
Let's do that. We're definitely not going to do it this Saturday.
right.
So the 9th. Oh, good question.
Thank you.
Okay, starting on the 9th. Okay, wow. Then the other thing we need to schedule, and I think we can do this offline, is the inner core team meeting. And for that, folks, I was thinking about 10 o'clock, or I'm sorry, noon on Mondays. Inner core team meeting. Noon on Mondays. How does that sound, folks?
That still works even for people in California.
Yeah, I think so. They get up at 9. I mean, all of our other meetings started at noon, and this one does, and everybody seems to make it. All right. So noon meeting on Mondays. All right. So not this Saturday, next Saturday, the 9th is the first one. Hey, Flood, welcome. I'm so excited about some of the new people who are joining us that I know that are amazing organizers and fascinating community builders. All right, great. So that's what for folks on the inner core team. And I think I saw a note that somebody wanted to have that be open. Of course, those are open, Ira. And so if you've been involved for a while, though, I just ask if you've been involved for a while, that's great. If you're brand new, email me and let's talk and let's, bring you up to speed on that level of involvement, if that's okay. Let's see.
There was someone who had their hand raised, Francesca.
Oh, hi, Francesca. Sure, let's do that. Let's take a few questions, keep them short. Go ahead, Francesca. You might be muted.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, I wasn't clear about what the Q&A thing is. I just want to mention not Markey was, Waxman was talked about. I mean, we have a lot of allies now in the Congress, so I think we should, Bernie Sanders, Ed Markey, who was just elected to the Senate from the House. We've got AOC, we've got AOC in the House. So, we should, I assume, or I guess I want to ask, are you putting together a list of, of politicians who are clearly working on the same page with us? And I just want to mention AOC was at Netroots. A lot of the younger politicians, have really been at Netroots, so that could be helpful. So that's it. I haven't been hearing their names.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Sure. Well, a couple points on that. One, you heard in the symposium that Senator Merkley suggested a bicameral committee of the House and Senate to report out regularly on the day-to-day plans. Oh, and that's one group I didn't mention, the current activities team. And don't let me forget to come back to that. So we need to follow up, or hopefully they don't need us to follow up, but we probably should follow up. I don't know. We'll work on that from our legislative team and following up with them to get that in motion. But there's something else that's been launched, and there's a group of 20 House offices that are working as a House Left Climate Group. It's not a formal title, but that's what they called it in their email. And they're working on a gold standard climate bill as well, and EJ policy. And so their stated missions are to create that and to form resistance to, moderate movements by anybody, and then to build more power. And there's an intake form for suggestions for, policy demands for that group. So it's just to note that these things are forming. Many things are going to start to form. And so the trick will be for us to try to stay interfaced to the extent we can with them. And it's not going to be easy because there's going to be a lot of tentacles in this. And we can't be all things to all people, so we have to really be mindful of that because we're taking on all things to all people scale of projects. But I mentioned this House office group because they have a form out already seeking input. So for our policy sector teams, we need to, really buckle down, and hopefully they're having that policy sector leads are going to have their own meeting, right? Christine Key, you're working on setting that up so we can figure out how we're going to get all the information that we've amassed in terms of what's missing, et cetera, organized in a way that we could provide input into things like this. It may be a while before, we're not going to try to run the daily legislative game. It's too much. I can't do it. And we're still working, against power structures that we don't have enough power to beat. So we have to develop the comprehensive vision together so that we start to have that kind of political power. But in the meantime, there will be things happening. And a lot of people wanted to stay abreast of that kind of thing. So we've created that committee that will stay on top of current legislative initiatives and pushes and report back to these meetings. We'll have a regular slot. These meetings will start to probably have a little bit of a more of a formulaic approach. They'll probably have the committees that are being formed giving report backs, updates on where they stand on their review of various things, just to keep everybody informed. And then the working, of course, will happen in the committees around the time. But that group has formed, and if you're interested in that, join that. And it's a team that's going to have to stay on their toes, and we'll figure out what groups there are. And Natal, maybe you can help with this, but I know EDF is doing this. Food and Water Watch, I'm not sure we can get them to work on it together, but we could maybe be an intermediary and say, okay, we want whoever's really following the day-to-day, what groups are, we want to somehow create a process for their information flow to reach the grassroots through our network, through our meetings. So we'll figure out what that looks like, but some sort of reporting mechanism from the organizations that are really have the capacity to follow the day-to-day agenda. And that will give all of you an opportunity to, you know, stay in the current action. Any other questions? You can pop them
Sally,
in the
Sally
thing.
has something.
Sally, go ahead. Which Sally? Oh, Sally's. Hi, Gillard.
Yep.
Hi, Sally. Oh, and
It
that's,
was just that setting up the meeting.
Oh.
Yeah, setting up the meeting on the 9th conflicts with the drawdown portion of that conference that somebody posted in the chat. So we may want to.
you're cutting in and out, Sally.
Turned off her audio again.
Your audio went off.
I see what he
Sorry.
was trying to say, though. If
Yeah.
the drawdown event that was listed in the chat box goes from the 5th of January up through the 9th of January, and that's the date that you set those Saturday meetings for. So there might be a conflict there.
Yeah, there probably will be. I think we need to get rolling. This is the hard part in New York and everything. There's so many conflicts. I don't know that we could try to revisit. We'll just get started with whoever can attend, whoever's not attending drawdown, and we'll record our meetings, and you know, we'll just keep rolling. Sally, though, you mentioned the so that just reminds me about the carbon pricing conversation, which we were going to have today, but we decided to postpone. We're going to be having all the in-depth policy conversations along the way. And there are so many topics there, and other groups are going to lead that work, and we'll have input, et cetera. So I just hope no one's discouraged that we haven't come to conclusions. We really haven't come to any conclusions on any of the policy sector issues, and that we're just basically still in the investigation and education mode. And I just encourage everyone to go to the digest, and education is a huge piece of this, and to start studying the digest and start sharing the digest. It's not that everything's in the digest, but it's a good starting point. And to get your groups and your legislative directors and your policy teams looking at the digest, and then figuring out, you know, how they would like to participate in a either a coalition, or, you know, the legislative drafting team. It may be that there's, you know, a higher level that takes on the heavy lifting, which would be wonderful, but then we also will be there providing input, like I said earlier. So that was the end of that thought. Any other questions?
Just to chime in on what you were saying, Todd, right now, I think our job at this stage is to open doors and bring in more people, to bring in more people power, more energy, more leadership from all corners, a really diverse open tent of people power to push our leaders farther than they want to go to get a robust climate bill. And yes, I think it's also a good time to start brainstorming about possible kinds of laws and what the laws would look like. But I don't feel like our job right now is to hone in on specific paths. It's just to bring in more energy, more people, more heart, more unity, and more, I think, diverse leadership as much as we can. And, you know, over the course of this year, we'll see more and more clarity on what kinds of bills people want. And I hope that our coalition can be the glue that holds together very divergent views. Oh, this is not strong enough, it's too strong. You know, this sort of fighting, that we can be the love and the trust and the friendship that keeps the green movement strong behind a push for a good climate bill.
Beautifully said. I couldn't agree more. We're facilitators of building a new tent and a bigger tent. And that's a beautiful mission. It's actually a little bit easier, and because we don't have to fight too much about substance, but we have, you know, all the policy teams that are hard at work, and there's a lot of passion of individuals in this group about different things. And I want you to know that we're creating systems and processes. And so if you feel passionate about something, the trick now is to find the organizations and the coalitions that share your passion for whatever piece of this puzzle you like, and invite them into the conversation. Explain to them that we're forming a coalition of coalitions. Invite them to that early stage, because there will be different stages of development of all of these pieces. And it's most important is that we have a very diverse group at the beginning, as diverse as possible during the initial formation conversations. And so this is really the time to go cast your net wide, use all your networks and invite them all to the party, and we'll see how it shapes up over time. Any other questions?
Rachel has a question.
I would like to propose that we invite two trade study organizations to start meeting with the Greens that Todd has been pulling in. I think it's very unusual that Biden has chosen for his trade representative somebody who used to be the congressperson who had the most to do with the trade representative, and that there's going to be a possibility to change the law by which Congress could take more time to look at treaties, which would mean that the grassroots could look at treaties. And the reason I feel so strongly about it is I keep bumping into monkey wrenches in the climate legislation. If we don't see what's going on in trade, we could have the most wonderful words in the legislation, but the legislation will be absolutely hogtied. And I don't think it would hurt to bring them into a meeting where we promise them nothing. I know Todd wanted the Greens to come first, but just to explore. I think in the long run, the fact that we have anticipated this puts us in a better position if some of the more progressive groups start thinking the same way. It's not like there's this big moat and we can't get to trade anymore. This is historic. We can get to trade.
Thank you, Rachel. So I think that fits into the, current actions team, which you're going to be on. And so and
really?
it could also
That's
fit into the
great.
bigger picture of the coalitions and everything.
Absolutely.
So, all right, well, we're going to have to create some Google spreadsheets, more Google spreadsheets. All right, just brace it, Todd, embrace it. Where we have opportunity for everybody to list organizations that you think we should be reaching out to.
Okay.
But really, everyone should feel empowered to conduct that outreach directly.
Okay.
And we'll figure out how to bring them all into the same, process and framework over time.
Okay.
So just
Sounds good.
forge ahead with your outreach. Look for the authoritative groups that you respect, and let's get them in this conversation. And as Attell says, these kinds of bigger conversations are going to happen over time at multiple levels over the course of the next 6 months. I mean, there's a desire to have something fast. It depends on who comes together, and because some of them have capacity to turn around a bill in a few months if they wanted to. But if it depends on who comes together. So we'll see. But all these conversations will be addressed. Oh, good, Lavona, I'm glad you raised your hand because I wanted to welcome you and thank you for everything you're doing on the faith team and invite you to say a few words if you'd like.
Okay. Well, about the faith team, we're planning to have a meeting the last week in January, date either between Tuesday, Thursday or Friday, trying to juggle people's availability during that time period. And if you're interested in the faith team, we are maintaining a separate list of folks so that we can communicate with them. I'll put in the chat a link to the person that can add you to that group, and then we will then regularly participate with them. So this meeting that we're going to have is sort of follow up to the symposium, give people an opportunity to dig a little bit deeper and have some discussion. We'll probably have some breakout rooms in there going on, and probably have some of the speakers or presenters from our session are being invited that were in the faith and indigenous session during the meeting and the symposium. So that's kind of our current plan. We'll be plugging people in. The first line is with the adopted district. We have a few groups, including the United Church of Christ, as well as Green Faith, that have groups that they want to plug into the adopted district. And we'll be doing some training about what's faith language to really bring to the table as well. When we're talking with our legislators and staff. So that's kind of what's happening on that side. We have a few people we meet with as sounding boards on moving forward. And I had a couple of quick questions though. And I think I might have actually, so one of the immediate things when we were talking about the lists, creating the long list, Todd, I just want to mention, when we were putting together the list of invites, there were additional folks on that list that couldn't come, or we had enough people already. So we could really be building out from that existing list and maybe make that into a separate one, for things rather than kind of starting from scratch. And then I just wanted clarification because they're doing some scheduling things, is you alluded to it, the January 13th. Because you announced during the symposium of bringing about the legislative directors on. Is that off the table? Are we just looking then at our regular meeting during that time period, but not, I know you toyed with, maybe having something going on at that time. And I just for planning purposes and also getting back to our symposium session speakers, I was wondering.
Yeah, no, I'm thank you for all that. First of all, the faith team work is going great, and they're going to be mapping the congregations against congressional districts. In fact, I want to talk about the mapping if anyone hears from the mapping team, and then just briefly on the adopted district to introduce Meryl and Brenna and Tara. I don't know if Brenna could make it. She had something earlier. And then to invite Gary to talk about the health group, if he's here. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the whole list to see who's here. But first on the mapping, and then to January 13th. We don't have January 13th figured out yet. And the holidays and recovery time from the symposium, I haven't been able to pull this together. And so I don't know, maybe I'm gonna have to regroup with Attell and to see if we think we could, if there's an opportunity for public communication at that soon. It feels to me like it's gonna be too rushed, that it might be necessary really to tease this out a little bit behind the scenes first. And then, but that just leaves an open program for the 13th. But we could delve on the 13th into coalition models a little bit, review all the different platforms, maybe a little bit, the bill list. I don't know. We could see what we want to, how to program the 13th. This is the challenge with being in this segue period of trying to program regular meetings for the public. It's a real challenge. So I'm not sure exactly how to resolve that. We're gonna have to talk about that on the inner core team. Attell, thoughts?
I do have some thoughts. I think, for the general public, we should keep it to big moments like Earth Day and Net Roots Nation, when they have that giant gathering of all the key progressives. Otherwise, we'll really burn through a lot of our energies. At Roots Nation conference, it's best for us to keep trying to bring in more allies. Let's bring in the youth activists. Let's bring in people working on racial justice. Let's bring in people working on, indigenous lands and pipelines. Let's bring in, the Black Lives Matter movement and the women's rights movement. Let's sort of like reach out to all the legislative directors that we can of the groups that can help, like the League of Conservation Voters. I think we really need that kind of group on our side, because the League of Conservation Voters and other groups like that kind of control the DC environmental agenda to a great degree. So making sure that, we're kind of minimizing rivalries between the different big green groups so that we don't have Sierra Club and Greenpeace and NRDC and LCV, League of Conservation Voters, fighting one another. I think this kind of grass tops mobilization will take a lot of time. And I also feel like doing too many public events when we haven't given the Biden team the chance to set the agenda might be sort of putting the cart before the horse. let's, if we wait until the Biden team comes into place and everybody sort of like deals with the disasters that the Trump administration folks have left to their new counterparts, then starting in the summer, we could have like a lot more public events. And at that point, we can have different committees taking on a lot of leadership to do small events that they just run themselves. Each committee does more events by themselves without needing too much handholding from the rest of us. So we sort of divide and conquer.
Right. So I'm hearing that. And so this is the dilemma we're in. We set it every 2-week Wednesday meeting. This is one of them. So we had it like right after the symposium too, somehow. I don't remember it. But we had some great report backs. I didn't have to talk much. So we have this regularly scheduled meeting. And when I say to the public, it's really to the, the grassroots organizing, but it's our group, our community, all the people that are on this call, like 70. So like the same amount of people probably came to the core team call, which is the first and third Monday. So it could be that we don't need to have both of these meetings anymore. And that wouldn't break my heart to skip one of them, but it's really tricky because this one is sort of a report out for everybody to keep everyone informed. And the core team meeting is a report in, sort of a working meeting. So, and the idea of that is that we don't have to have, 50 different meetings. I don't have to have separate meetings with all the other teams. We have one senior staff meeting sort of. So I think for now, we'll leave the 13th on the schedule. And we'll just have to decide shortly as to whether to cancel one of those two functions, because it's 4 meetings a month. It's a lot. And that's before we even get into all those substantive work that we're doing. Sally, or anyone else have thoughts on this?
Yeah. What if we combined those 2 dates and made one, 2-hour meeting with, some people joining early, people staying late, so that you'd like have 3/4 of the time in one day. And
You mean combine the
That makes
core team
sense.
meeting and the general meeting?
yeah, just have them kind of back to back. Like, what, this is 90 minutes, so make it 2 hours. And start with one, end with the other, and drop the second date.
All right, let's think about that and see if that makes sense. It might make sense because these are really going to be working meetings and report back meetings combined now. And in the past, our meetings were all educational because we were going over bills after bills. We still have that work to do, but I don't know that I have the energy to schedule all of that, so consistently, unless we have a team working on scheduling that. So we can work these things out on the intercore team, but you guys understand the difference. I mean, I assume most of you are coming to both meetings. And so if anyone, feel free to chat and put in the chat whether you think, we need both of these meetings. They seem alike now because we're in this transition phase. So we're sort of having the same conversation in both meetings. But before they were quite different because this was really more of an educational platform where we were reporting to the broader grassroots community, and the others were the working team meetings. So
It's like
all right, we'll figure that.
Tara wants.
Oh, Tara.
Yeah, I wonder, that's okay. I put myself in the stack. Thank you, Greg.
Oh, shit, sorry. I muted you.
You're muted. Wait a second, Tara. You've been muted.
I wonder if we could have the legislative teams take over, not the legislative teams, but the different policy teams take over, like 2 policy teams take over at least one of the meetings per month and switch out which ones. And then those policy teams will just have to pull out whatever bills are appropriate. 'Cause I hear what Attell is saying about letting the Biden team unfurl their plans and do some of the things that they're planning on doing. And I also really clearly heard Rashida Tlaib and Senator Markey or Representative Markey, whichever one he is, I really clearly heard them say that pressure is of the essence for getting stuff done. And people on various meetings saying like year 1 is really the year to get legislation passed. And our time frame is so screwed up. Like this would be so much better if we were working on it 20 years ago, but instead we're working on it now, which makes me just want to be like, well, whatever legislation we can push out that can be rolled out. You know, if there was something that could be voted on in February that wasn't part of a package, it would be awesome to get that passed. So if we can keep, like, it's hard, but if we can keep like rolling in different directions at the same time, and one is like the scooping everybody together and trying to get this giant coalition, which we need, and we need that like further ahead stuff. But the other thing is just trying to like put ourselves that whatever little stair ahead we can from whatever laws we can get passed out of what's just hanging out there.
Right. Right. So there'll be this gets back into the current action. And so it could be that these every 2-week meetings, you know, a half hour is for the current action team to report out and back, and everyone can engage on active things. So, all right, I'm hearing, I think I'm hearing we still have, I don't think we have to worry about engaging or interfering in any way with the Biden administration. They're going to be doing their thing. They're going to be rolling full steam ahead. The trick there is creating a flow of information so we can help. But, you know, there's a lot of groups that need to be doing this. So the conversation at the upper level really is, that's their job, the current fight. It's really their job. And ours is to build greater capacity and unity for the home run, you know, for the big wins. And hopefully these roads will all, you know, work together. Gary, I just want to introduce briefly, who else is working on the mapping team? Do we have anyone here from mapping? I forget who it was that volunteered to do that.
I'm on that team, but I don't know who else is or how to get connected more. But I'm excited, and it's a very cool project, and I'm excited to meet the other people that want to dig in.
All right, so that's Shannon speaking, and there were several others. So we're going to be mapping our organizations by Congress district, and then of course the faith organizations, and hopefully we'll get into a few other areas of other professions, and just to get this ground game taking shape. But Gary, I wanted to introduce you briefly just to talk 2 sentences about the health team that you've pulled together already, and that you're sort of bringing into this arena.
Yeah, so hi, thanks Todd. So for those that don't know me, I'm Gary Belkin. I was Deputy Health Commissioner here in New York City. I'm now working mostly on climate and mental health issues, and working with national mental health and public health organizations around that. And increasingly also connecting up with a little more mature coalition building around the larger medical profession around this. So at the last meeting I raised, and there was a feeling we should pursue a health and mental health group, a policy group, both to have policy reflect the human damage we also need policy to protect, as well as the environmental fixing. And also, Todd, to bring that whole community of interest along as part of a coalition of coalitions that's an added voice to what we collectively want to do. So I actually have a question. So I'm actively recruiting. There are a lot of folks I know, but I want to really bring as large a group as interested in. So I will give everyone my email right now in the chat, and please, if you're interested, reach me. But my question to you, Todd, is because we've been talking about and using the words groups and teams interchangeably, and sort of the functions of policy development, what's the content we really want to advocate for on the one hand, versus coalition building, reaching out and really getting to that the coalition state. I see mental health and health work to be done in both of those purposes, but is that how you see the team managing both of those purposes, or would those be situated in different parts of that, or interface with the committee on committees, or how? I'm just trying to navigate how to move with your with your tree of organization.
Yeah, tree is a good word. Climate tree. I keep coming back to a climate tree. I want to see we're going to create a picture of this with all the different teams and committees. So I think that's to be determined, but I think you're right. Different sectors will want to have, a role in discussing what a coalition of coalitions looks like, which is really about setting up the institutions, the framework, and then the separate related but separate legislative group, which will hopefully blossom into a series of policy tables on each topic, and they will come up with their own suggestions, and then that will all merge. It'll depend on what shape that takes and who's leading it, et cetera. But that would be my vision at the outset. And then we just keeping in mind that we're also running our own little game on this, but through our own policy sectors, to the extent that that policy information is going to funnel through there, it comes from a few different perspectives. So we won't have absolute clarity on this just yet, but with time, I think. But I would participate in both of these committees if I were you for now. And
Okay,
and we'll see how it shakes out and what form it takes.
very good. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Adopted district, I don't know if Brenna's here. Tara, you was just here with us, but Brenna Cohen is now point on adopted district. And so if your local organization has not yet done so, please adopt your congressional district. And again, we're just building the infrastructure at this point. Oh, and I was going to also say to Gary's point that you don't have to email him direct. You can, his email, I think he's going to put in it, but on the committee and team intake form, you can sign up for all of these things. But don't sign up for too many. It's better to sign up for one, maybe two. Who else had a hand up? Did you say, Gary? Greg?
No, I just said Brenna's not here.
Oh, she's not here. Yeah, okay. She had something going on. Tara, is there anything else or Meryl that y'all want to say about the adopted district, or is that good for now? And to all the people that are running your various pieces, be sure to check the response, the back end of that intake form on a regular basis to keep up, and it's growing and people are volunteering for all sorts of things. Doctors Médecins Sans Frontières, y'all are talking about Doctors Without Borders. Okay, you're giving ideas to Gary in the chat, I see. That's wonderful. It seems like we need another intake form for suggestions for groups, but as again, you don't have to tell us, go find the groups and make initial contact, describe what's going on, create that warm, initial relationship, and then we can fit them into the system. All right. Well, it's getting.
Francesca has a key question.
Go ahead.
About...
And then Joel, I want to ask you something. Go ahead, Francesca, again. You might be muted.
I don't know how to check the back part of the intake form because I had put in my intake and then I didn't hear anything back. So how do we know when a meeting is happening?
Oh, okay. Well, so if you've just signed up, no worries there. People will be getting in touch with you eventually. So those team leads, it's the holidays and everything.
Okay. Because I signed up a week ago, haven't heard anything, but that's okay.
Yeah, okay. You won't hear right back away. So if, most groups are already active and have their teams working, but it could be a little while before you hear back from the leads. Everyone was a little distracted. Oh, that just triggered something else I was going to say and I forgot already. Oh, I know. I was going to invite anyone who's brand new that has any questions or would like to say anything. Flood, Artem, I see some old friends, new faces here. Would you like to say anything, Flood? Any thoughts? You have to unmute if you want.
There we go. No, this is very exciting. I'm doing a coalition of coalitions thing. And the Indigenous Environmental Network is a coalition of coalitions. And so I'm doing some deep research into that. It ends up in dozens, if not hundreds, of local groups all around the country that form into coalitions that themselves are in a coalition that themselves are in a coalition. And so that's the primary research I'll be bringing to the table up front. Blessed be. That's it.
Yay, yay. Flood and I have had many conversations around campfires about these kinds of things. And now we get to do it in real time. This is very exciting. All that expertise coming to bear. Any other new people who would like to say something?
I'd like to say something. I'm Lisa Walker. Sorry, my video is not on. But I brought something up a little earlier about the unity focus of the group, and I hope we can sustain that. It's a bit difficult, I know, when everybody's very passionate about different things, but if that's our goal, how do we achieve it? What are the unifying factors, the unifying fundamentals of this group, and what are we going to sort of pledge in an effort to strive to that when we come into the group? Because I'm very much 100% supportive of inclusivity, bringing everyone to the table, diversity, that's got to be there. But I think somewhat we tend to, as human beings, to pick each other apart sometimes, and it's divisive, and we get immobilized by that. So how are we, in a concerted, directed way, tackling that challenge, which is ultimately what we need to do is unify? We need to direct some attention to specifically tackling that and how we go about it, and maybe have some value setting up front. I don't know. That just came to my mind.
Thank you. Thank you. No, this is an important piece of the puzzle for sure. And we'll be discussing this in the committee on the working group, the committee on the work coalition of coalition. That'll be, you know, setting those tones and parameters and agreements. All of that will be, you know, initiated and then discussed hopefully by the groups that come to the conversation.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Along with a culture of conflict and dispute resolution, you know, concepts, putting them on the table up front, talking about ego and brands and the things that divide people that we've been able to navigate pretty well, and by setting the right intentions as we have right out the gate. But it will get more complicated as we grow, of course. And on that note, you know, we might want to formalize climate crisis policy. Yes, Joel's next. A little bit, our group, who we are as a network, and we can decide to do that. And we might need some new infrastructure, a new website for some things. We'll see. Joel, I'm very excited that you're here from the League of, oh goodness, the lawyers.
I'm also just wanted to say thank you for doing this. It's inspiring. I'm co-chair of the Environmental Justice Committee of the National Lawyers Guild, and we have 500 members, and including legal workers. So we'll definitely spread the word, and a lot of those lawyers and legal workers are working with different organizations that are out there.
I'm so excited to hear this, Joel. And if we could set up a one-on-one meeting, I'd like to talk more in depth about it. But this has been a big piece of the puzzle for us, is I'm like, where are the grassroots lawyers ready to help us fight this fight in Congress? And I think we've just found y'all.
Well, so, at least a portal.
So, exactly. That's what we need, a portal, because we really, you know, we have the health team that Gary just mentioned. He's got all these organizations he's working with. Right. It would be good if we could form a legal team of the same way. And if you wanted to head that up, that would be fabulous. And then we would just start to do the outreach in a similar way to bring all the various legal, the more the grassroots, the better. But you know what I mean? Right. Entities together in their own sort of coalition of legal coalitions.
I just want to say, a lot of my I guess part of the mantra is that we actually have to say that a good law without enforcement is worse than no law. So we just want to make sure that a lot of these bills that get passed in the past and going into the future are not just aspirational. So one of the things we want to bring to it, that there definitely has to be accountability and all the elements that there's an enforcement, you know, feature involved.
Absolutely. Fabulous. So Joel, are you going to join the legislative committee?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. All right, great. And if you have other, you know, acquaintances, everyone out there, lawyers in particular, legislative directors, and you know, they're just going to play a role in this process and conversation. It won't be to the exclusion of everyone else, to the contrary, but I've worked with legislative director teams before to craft legislation, and it just says I entered the waiting room, so that must be Giovanni or someone else. So it helps to bring the lawyers in there that can help bring some organization to the conversations, and to stream the policy input from the policy people into, you know, what laws do we need to change, and come up with an outline of that kind of thing. Again, this might happen at super levels, but we're going to try to marshal some of this capacity ourselves so that we make sure that the people have a voice in this setting the goalposts.
I think you have a question from someone. Doug has something to say.
I was just going to mention technically in the Zoom, it says chat disabled, at least for me. I'm not sure about others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm disabled too, and I haven't had my chat question answered yet.
Oh,
I was going to
let's
throw
fix
in the
that.
link for the congressional
That's not on
district, but
purpose.
maybe somehow the administrators still can chat, but participants can't. I don't know.
Oh, there it goes.
It's back. Give you a link.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, everybody. All right, well, we're getting close to 1:30, which is when we normally stop, but is any other, Keith, would you like to say anything?
There's other folks that have questions. if you wanna-
No? Okay, he doesn't want to say anything. Anyone else? Christine, any other things about the policy sector teams? Did you have that meeting in the works?
Not yet, in the process of setting it up. I think
right.
that the leads, Todd, would appreciate if you could be attending the meeting also. Could we do that?
Oh, yeah, I plan to be there. I
Okay,
need to
awesome.
be
Then
there.
I'll be in touch with you to get your dates and then we can move forward.
Okay, good.
Yeah, this is Nancy. I'd like to quickly make a comment building on Joel's. Because I was responsible for 15 years of creating and implementing state legislation in the state of California. And between passing it and enforcement is a huge effort at education and full engagement, facilitation of all the changes needed, especially when the legislation involves a deep shift in consciousness and understanding, different sense of what your job is, et cetera. That's a critical element to have as part of our planning, even when it doesn't affect the legislation directly, but often it will affect the legislation as to how you frame it and how you propose to carry it out. And I have a question. Is there a way that we can reach each other directly, have each other's contact information? Is that a legitimate networking within our group, or is there a sense that somehow bypassing the structure?
So we have a team. Shannon, do you want to talk about that? I mean, so here's my thoughts on that generally. We're trying to organize a system of communication. So, and that's really the challenge when you're going to scale, like we're trying to get to scale and expand. So we don't have all the great systems yet. You know, we're just starting to build them, and there will be additional levels of systems that will be created, you know, by other groups probably. But for us, we're trying to work through our committees and teams. So, and then we always have open meetings on Mondays and Wednesdays, you know, the Mondays and the Wednesday meetings. And you can always come here and ask questions and connect with everybody in chat and whatnot. We can publish a list of everybody's names and emails. I don't have a problem with that. We'd have to go through to make sure that's okay. But right now it's through committees. So I think it's, if you ever wanted to reach somebody, just go ahead and ask. It's not that we're trying to keep you from that by any means. And Shannon is talking about creating a communication tools that would, you know, then be much more institutionalized ways for people to communicate. I personally can't participate in any more of those systems, but there's a desire by people who know how those work to create them. And I think that will facilitate what you're talking about. But for now, if there's anyone you want to talk to, just ask.
Yes, I have a question.
Excuse me, just get clear. So you're saying put a note in chat directly to, we're allowed to address directly our fellows in chat and just put a note in chat asking to connect. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, of course, yes. Everyone can use chat however you want, communicate with each other, connect with each other. Absolutely, whatever you want to do.
Thank
you.
This
is a
Looks
free,
like
open space. Go ahead.
David Takahashi, you want to speak? David, are you there?
Yes, what was the question?
You had your hand raised, so.
Oh, I had my hand raised because the chat was disabled and
okay.
That was taken care of.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for
Okay,
noticing.
this is Judy Weiss. I'd like to raise an issue that hasn't been talked about yet, which is among all the lists of the various committees, I didn't see anything addressing science. And there's a whole lot of scientists, I think, who would be very interested. And I should think that ought to be included in this as a committee or a subcommittee or something.
Absolutely. So we're in touch with March for Science, Drawdown, and MIT on that front. And my hope is that they are going to head that effort and that we didn't have to duplicate it. And all indications are positive that they will. So, but if they don't, we'll create a, you know, our own little task force on it to bring in grassroots scientists, but I'm hoping that they'll take point on that. And that they'll also then funnel scientists into the adopted district framework. Maybe March for Science will create its own system for that. We'll see. But
And
good
Todd,
point.
maybe if they don't want to lead, we could also run it by the Union of Concerned Scientists.
That was the group I was thinking of.
Yeah, so that, you know, whichever way the cookie crumbles, we get some group of responsible, well-known, reputable scientists leading their peers to help advise whichever kind of law gets packaged.
Fabulous. So yes.
I agree.
Yeah.
UCS has a long track record, and they've been around a lot longer. March for Science is a really new couple years ago, you know, maybe 4 years ago. So I think UCS is definitely the place to go.
Fabulous. All right, great. Well, these aren't mutually exclusive. Keep in mind, we're going to be organizing at the grassroots level, and we're going to try to get the tops to organize differently and better and faster at their level. We're going to do them simultaneously because you can't put all your eggs in one basket in this party. And, you know, sometimes our momentum will prod other things to happen. So unfortunately, or fortunately, we're going to play our role in a parallel path, sort of. But again, those groups are, you know, everybody will hopefully be in the mix as it pans out.
Pam has her hand raised.
All right, Pam, one more, and then we'll let everyone go to get ready for your New Year's Eve celebrations. Go ahead, Pam.
I appreciate that. Just a quick thing, I put a note in the chat, but I'm willing to set up a database with people's names and emails if we do want to go forward with that.
Fabulous. So can you connect with Shannon about that?
Sure.
And maybe ask everybody. Some people are okay. I'm okay with everybody having my contacts from this group. I trust you all. But some people might not be okay with it. So we don't want to violate anybody's privacy.
What if I put my email in the chat, and if people want to share theirs, then I can collate that?
Well, I mean, you're welcome to do that, and people can. Who's Pam? Which Pam is this?
Pam North.
Pam what? North?
Pam North.
Oh, hi, Pam.
Hi.
Let's chat by email about this. Figure out how to do this. We might have to do a particular intake form for a public listing of everybody's names. And I think we can do that because we also might want to ask groups to decide, you know, are we going to formally endorse our network or give it a name or something? So, all right, let's work on that. And Shannon can help with us.
Okay.
All right, Artem, did you want to say anything? One of my other dear old friends who's signed up to volunteer. I'm excited to see you here.
I'm just excited to be here and to re-engage and hopefully help with some of the legislative strategy and policy stuff. And so thank you for letting me be here, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Thank you, Artem. Welcome. All right, everybody. Any last thoughts? If not, I'm so glad we had this meeting. Oh, Joel, go ahead real quick.
I just want to say, I think we want to also work on the structure, how the federal government deals with this. I think we could also, there's been talk about setting up an ombudsman for climate and environmental justice. That could be a shortcut for all of us to speak to the White House and the like. So I'll send information about that out to everybody. But we've learned from past experiences that sometimes it's important to have a portal into those powers that be. So
I agree completely. I was ombudsman for brownfields revitalization in Massachusetts when Gina McCarthy was there at Environmental Justice, Environmental Affairs, back in the 80s. They can serve a very versatile role, and they're putting all sorts of staff in place for these kinds of things. So hopefully we will get a direct line of communication set up. I already wrote Gina's office at NRDC, but not about setting something like that up. So, all right, to be continued. All these pieces can be worked out. I was thinking we should have canceled this meeting, and I'm so glad we didn't. Just want to thank you, everyone, for your constancy and your passion and being here and for driving us all forward. You're all a remarkable team already, and it's just really getting started. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I'm trying not to share that information too much because we got to forge ahead, but I feel excited and overwhelmed at the same time. We just got to build more infrastructure, get our flow going, get that in place. And I think it's going to go really well. It couldn't be more positive in terms of the energy, the mojo that we have, the community feeling, and just everyone's dedication has been incredible. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it, and have a wonderful new year. We all deserve a new beginning, and I think we're on a new path and lots of exciting things ahead. So happy New Year.
Thank you, everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Unmute everybody if you want. And
Yeah. Thank you all.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. Thank you, everyone.
New Year. Yeah.
Happy New Year.